Hey, your friendly neighborhood DM here. This is a new series that we'll be doing focused on new players. But if you already play D&D, you might learn something. And if you're a veteran, maybe this will help you when you go to bring in new players. So stick around. In today's video, I'm going to cover three things. What is D&D? Why? Why do people love it? Why have people been playing it since the 70s? And how do you get started? So let's jump right into it. As far as what is D&D? I tell new players that D&D is a collaborative storytelling experience. You and your friends, or soon to be friends if you're playing with a new group, sit around a table and get to build this story together. It consists of two different parties. You have your DM, which is much more like a narrator, and your players, which take control of individual characters in this story. Your DM will set the scene for you and knows what's going on in the world, while the players oftentimes don't know what to expect, but are reacting as their players would react in the game. This is also another key piece in that it's a role-playing experience. You don't have to necessarily act like your character, although some will and most enjoy it, but you will be controlling this character through this story. Most sessions will start with the DM either recapping where you guys left off last session in a longer story, otherwise known as a campaign, or setting the scene. Something along the lines of, you push open the door to the inn, expecting to hear and see it full of laughter and joy, but it seems sullen and quiet. You do see a few patrons on either side having their drinks, minding their own business. The lights are dimly lit, and straight across from you, you see the bartender looking down, cleaning a mug. What do you do? That is where you, as the player, however you choose and however you feel comfortable expressing it, tell both the players around you and the DM what it is your character is doing. You can simply go, I walk up to the bartender, get his attention, and ask him about what specials they have or what he's heard. Or, if you prefer, you can act as your character and let your DM know, I'm going to walk up to the bar. Bartender, what is it you have to drink? And then your DM will respond. And it's that back and forth that'll create the story that you guys are all working together on. So why have people been playing D&D since the 70s? Why do people love it so much? Why do people play it now when we have video games and books that have been around for forever? Video games are great in that you get to be a part of the story. You can feel like you're in the driver's seat. But you can only do what's pre-programmed in the game. You're following a predetermined path. In books, you can get these excellent stories of great adventures, but you're reading someone else's story. In D&D, you get to be in the driver's seat and that you get to control what your player's doing, and it's only limited by your creativity. There's nothing else like that. There are other D&D-like systems, but we'll get into that in the future. The other thing that I think a lot of players will mention, and if they don't mention it, you'll pick up on it when they tell you stories, is that it's interesting. When we recall stories from our campaigns, or long stories typically done in months or years as you meet every time and continue the same story, you don't turn around and say, do you remember that time when our characters went into that dungeon and fought the demons and almost died? No. Pay attention and you'll often hear, do you remember when we were down in the dungeon in the heat of the battle, we were on death's door, but we somehow made it out of there with our lives? That's what you'll often hear. And it's funny how our brains work. We remember those situations, obviously not the same as and not as real as if we were really there, but it's somewhere in between. It's not, you don't remember you playing the game, you remember the image. And if you're imagining it in your head, as you should be, then you'll even vividly remember that and recall it. And the emotions are true. As you go through these trials and tribulations with your other players, you'll build a bond with them the same as your characters are building bonds with those characters. And that's why D&D is unique. Nothing really like it. And last, how do you play? Once you've decided you're bought in, or at least you're willing to give it a session, right? Give it a try. What do you need to play? In all honesty, you really don't need much. You need a set of dice, which I guarantee you your friends will probably have and are happy to lend you. But if you do commit, then I would recommend you get your own. You'll want to anyway, trust me. It's also good to know the basic rules, so you can use a player's handbook for that. Again, most of your friends will have one, and they'll be happy to let you borrow it during the session. I recommend not reading through everything, but kind of just skimming through to get the general gist of it. Things like, what can you do on a turn? What is a turn? How does combat work? And again, the nitty gritty, don't worry about it too much. Your DM and your fellow friends will walk you through it. But it saves a lot of time to know the basics. And last, you're gonna need a character sheet. A character sheet, I don't know if you can see this. Screw it. I'll put one up here in post. A character sheet allows you to have the mechanics of your character. And the mechanics are, again, just in how things work when you're playing. Really, all you need to show up with is an idea. And oftentimes your DM will sit with you before the session and help you create a character. Figure out what race, what class, what's your background, and what does that mean when you go to sit down and play. You could be a human fighter who's especially skilled with a rapier and going around, fighting everyone he can. Or you can go in with a half-orc who's a caster. Everyone always thinks he's dumb, but really he's very well trained. He lets everyone think that he's dumb, but in actuality, he could crush him with a spell. It's up to you. I'll go into the actual character creation in a separate video, because that is a process on its own. But as long as you've got these pieces in mind, I think you're ready to start.